Another really good game, Dawn, at noon is Nebraska at number 16 Indiana, 12 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. The storyline for me in this one, okay, just how legit is Indiana? So they went 3-9 last year, and they're off to a historic start under first-year head coach Curt Cignetti. Right now, the Hoosiers are 6-0 for the first time since 1967. And they've won those 6 games by an average of 32.7 points. So it's not like they're playing it close in all these games and coming out on top. No, they're blowing everyone out of the water right now. But as good as that start is, and is really good for Indiana, they're already making a bowl game when last year they weren't even close to making a bowl game. Indiana has yet to beat a top 55 team in PFF's power rankings. 4 of those wins have come over schools that are outside the top 85 or in the FCS. Nebraska, they're number 31 in our power ranking right now with a 5-1 record. So this is easily the best team that Indiana's played all year so far.
Absolutely, and it's a huge game when you talk about the Hoosiers' opportunity. Also, I just love that we're covering an Indiana game.
I love it.
Did not think – we thought they would be kind of like, okay, they might make a bowl game. Curt Cignetti will get them going. We didn't think we'd be previewing a big game like this late in the season. But, no, Cignetti's got them going. I think they execute really well. I do think they're for real, honestly. I think this is going to be a really competitive game one way or the other. And the big thing, I think, too, if you play those teams, cool, but they did dominate them, right?
Yeah.
They took care of business. They've looked really good. Curtis Rourke has looked really good. The entire thing, all the James Madison guys have looked really good. They've got it rolling, and I think this Nebraska team presents a really good challenge for them. It's to me, it's easily the best defense they've played all year. That's going to be the biggest thing. But if they get this win, we're actually talking playoff contention for Indiana. Look, they're already number 16, right? Nebraska's a big win. You get by this team, I think they're better than, I forget who, but it's the next 2 teams they're playing, and then you get Michigan and Ohio State. And I think especially that Michigan game, I'm kind of looking at it like, you know what? If they're 9-0 going into that game, who am I to doubt them to beat a Michigan or maybe even compete with Ohio State? Who knows? I don't know that we know how good this team is, like you mentioned, but they've got a shot. The fact that it's week 8 and we're talking about, we put Indiana and playoffs in the same sentence, that's incredible.
Yeah, even Donnie in the chat saying right now, who would have thought this would have been a big-time game back in August? Yeah, this is an awesome game right now. It's so cool to see how these 2 programs have done so far this year. And like you said, though, yeah, they have played an easy schedule, but they're not playing it close. They're beating everyone by almost 5 touchdowns right now. This is what you should expect from a really good team, and Indiana's doing that. They're beating everyone, like I said, by an average of 33 points a game. So really, really good for the Indiana Hoosiers so far this year. Dolan, though, you have the Indiana offense led by a quarterback in Curtis Rourke that's one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country. So what should we know when he and the Hoosiers have the ball?
Oh, the Canadian cannon, Curtis Rourke. I'm just making up nicknames.
Love it. No, it's good.
But,
we'll go with it.
I got to be honest, this was a hard one. And you know why? Because there's no gimmicks. There's no trick plays. It's not Wake Forest slow mesh. It's not an academy school running triple. It's not one guy being Superman either. Like if we break down, I don't know, Boise State or something or in Arizona, there's like one guy who's carrying the whole team. That's not the case here. And I'm watching this team and I'm just going, they're playing like everyday football, like just fundamental football, and they're doing it incredibly well. And I'm sitting there watching offensive clip after offensive clip, just what is it? And it was just something jumped at me. I was like, man, they are so good at these RPOs. Curtis Rourke is so good. And I think because we talk about it like, oh, just about every team runs them to some extent, we kind of take for granted that, yes, it's a part of football, but some teams are better at it than others.
Yeah.
And right now, when Indiana runs an RPO, they're the best offense in the country. Now, level of competition be damned, right? Obviously, it's a thing where it's like, okay, you're playing Northwestern and Maryland and some of these teams. We'll find out this week how good it is. But it is like flawless execution when it comes to the overall grade is first. Curtis Rourke's in the top 20 throwing RPOs, third in EPA per play. First in receiving grade. This receiver group is low.
Really good.
I mean, you're talking about guys, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Miles Price, Miles Cross, and then you got 2 good backs. You got Tyson Lawton, Justice Ellison. They have a lot of weapons, and what that does, as opposed to, let's say, there's some teams that just with that one slot guy, that he's the RPO guy. Like, he's always running the bubble. He's always running the out. No, they have anybody on the field they could throw to. It could be a slant, an out, a bubble, a skinny post, all sorts of things. Obviously, handing the ball off and running pretty well, too. But I'm watching this team, and I'm going, man, they never have a negative play on one of these RPOs. It just doesn't happen, whether they hand it off, whether they throw it behind. And I'll tell you what, Curtis Rourke, and he's got so much experience, right? He's been around a long time. He started several years at Ohio. Last year, kind of had some issues coming off an ACL tear. I thought his mechanics weren't totally right. He's throwing the ball the way he did in 2022. The mechanics look right. He's fully recovered. Still wears a knee brace, but he looks like he's actually pushing off and getting into his mechanics throwing. But that's just something I noticed. I think early downs for Nebraska in this game are going to be big. I think the one thing that all those opponents you mentioned haven't done to Indiana is really push the issue and get them in a lot of 3rd and 9s and 3rd and 10s, in part because this RPO game for them, again, it's not anything exotic considering all of the football we know and watch and how modern football is now, right? College or NFL with all these RPOs. But there are some teams that, especially at quarterback, it's like, they're better at it. It continues to work, and they constantly make positive plays on early downs with it. You very rarely this year have seen Indiana in a 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. Now, the interesting thing to me, I don't think Indiana has a ton of speed, so you don't see them challenge like way down the field too much, even though Curtis Rourke is capable of those throws. It's a lot of the shorter throws on the RPOs, and their drop back game's a lot of intermediate. So I think if Nebraska can make stops and can be productive. Maybe it's press man coverage to throw off the timing. If they can stop the run with just their front, which they have a huge front with Ty Robinson and those guys, especially on their defensive line, we haven't seen a team yet put Indiana in 3rd and longs. I don't even have enough numbers to really make a big judgment on that part. I can tell you when Curtis Rourke has dropped back, he's been really good. It's why he's one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country. But it starts for me here with Indiana with just, when I tell you, at least against those first 6 opponents, flawless execution in this RPO game, it's a real problem, and they have a lot of weapons. You got 2 good backs, you have a really good quarterback, and you have 4 or 5 really good receivers that can all do things with the ball in their hands. I think early downs are going to be a thing to watch for Indiana's offense. If they get themselves, the other one too I want to throw in there, Nebraska this year, they haven't seen a boatload of RPOs, kind of a below average number, but 92nd in the country in defensive grade against them.
Yeah.
So this is suddenly a big thing where it's maybe strength against weakness. If they pull some of those linebackers up and Nebraska's trying to support the run and you get in behind them, these slants that get in behind linebackers are a huge problem when you're playing Indiana. So Nebraska, I think on early downs against RPOs, that's where this game could be decided. They need to be the first team to put Indiana in some bad situations.
So it's strength against weakness when you say that. Dawn is strength against weakness on the other side of the ball as well, because Dylan Raiola has been outstanding against zone defenses this year, which Indiana runs a lot of. Against zone, he has a 90.2 passing grade. That is 5th among all quarterbacks in the nation. Against man coverage, 44.4 passer grade, basically cut in half, even more than cut in half. That's 132nd in the country. So he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country against zone, one of the worst quarterbacks in the country against man. And when I was watching the tape back and saying, okay, why is he doing so well against zone? Why is he doing so poorly against man? A couple things for Dylan Raiola. One, not the most accurate right now. He's got a big arm, but not the most accurate. And against man coverage, you really got to be accurate, obviously. And sometimes he gets a little flustered with pressure in his face. Obviously, he's a true freshman, so it makes sense. But man coverage, a lot of times, coincides with the blitz coming, and you could see him get flustered a little bit too. Well, in zone coverage, he has great poise when he's kept clean, and he just waits back there. And he finds the soft spots in zone coverage. He finds the open receiver in zone coverage. That's where he really excels. Also, I want to point out, the Nebraska receivers don't really separate all that well either. So against man coverage, that weakness is really showing up even more and highlighted even more. Against zone coverage, you can find the soft spots. And again, Raiola is going to find the open receiver if you give him time back there to find the soft spots in zone coverage. So he is excellent against zone coverage, and he has not been good at all against man coverage. But the issue for Indiana is they run zone coverage more than almost any team in the country right now. Indiana has run zone coverage on 160 passing plays this year. That's a top 10 mark in the country. On the other side, they've run man coverage on only 20 snaps this year. That's tied for the second fewest in the Power 4. So it'll be really interesting for me to see if defensive coordinator Brian Haynes switches it up this week against Raiola and runs a lot more zone coverage than we're used to. But if he sticks to what they've done all year, I think that Dylan Raiola has a big advantage against this Indiana defense.
I could see it. I mean, and it's always interesting that week to week to see if they find these things and go, you know what, we can match up with these receivers. And you got guys like D'Angelo Pons on the outside, right? Who you go, well, you know what, maybe this week we match it up, or we just go a little bit more just to confuse them, or maybe they disguise it or there's always, or you mentioned a blitzing too, where it's like you could find different answers. But I think that's a great call. And with Raiola, if it's all those zone coverages, you mentioned a 4-man rush.
Yep.
We've talked about how comfortable he gets. When he's really in a rhythm, he's comfortable. He's definitely got poise beyond his years, right? Even as a true freshman. I think you make a very good point. There's a lot of variables on both sides of the ball in this game where it's Indiana's first big game. And then Nebraska, they're making adjustments every week and they're trying to figure it out. It's still pretty young on offense, especially with him. But this is going to be a fun one because I think there's a lot that we know about these two teams, but it still feels like there's a lot that we don't know, and that's the hardest part of predicting this game.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, in this big game, in Indiana's first real test of the 2024 season, will they pass it, and will they continue their magical undefeated run, or will Nebraska play spoiler on Saturday?
I have them passing it, and the more I watch them, I go, again, there's no frills to it. It's RPO heavy, sure, and I think their defense is pretty good too. And you got all those guys, Mikael Kamara's playing great, D'Angelo Ponge, Jalen Walker, name all the James Madison guys. C.J. West, though, transfer, I believe it was from Kent State. He's playing really good in the run up front. That's a guy who's going to be key to stopping the run in this game. Indiana, I actually do think they're really good. I just see this depth of talent that they haven't had in years. I mean, I know they had Michael Penix back then for a stretch, but that team wasn't real deep. This is a deep football team that executes really well. Obviously, we got to see them step up, but I think it helps that they're at home. It helps. I watched Curtis Rourke, and you can see all of the experience that he has in his career. And I know it was in the MAC, it was at Ohio, but look, 2022, he was the highest graded quarterback in the country. He was if off of that 2022 tape alone, I think he's a 4th or 5th round pick. I do. I think he's a guy who's really underrated in the hierarchy, even of these draft quarterbacks. I've got Indiana 31-27. I think they're going to find enough points here. They're really good on offense. I think they're going to be good enough on defense. They're going to have to be – the trenches are the interesting part to me because I think this is the biggest test for their offensive line. Their offensive line has played well. The scheme helps them out a lot. They're really high in pass blocking grade. They had a great day in pass protection against Northwestern last week, but this Nebraska front is really big. I'm curious if Indiana can find enough balance in the run game or if this game's going to be on Curtis Rourke. But I believe in Rourke. I believe what Cignetti's doing over there. He's got him executing at a high level. Indiana 31, Nebraska 27.
So you have a 1-game lead on me in our picks right now. I'm going to try to make it up right here. I'm going with Nebraska. I'm picking Nebraska to win this game 28-24. The more tape I watched, I just was so impressed by Dylan Raiola. And yes, the grade speaks for itself against zone coverage, but when you watch him, man, he just looks so comfortable. And if you give that kid time back there, he is going to dice you up. And Indiana, the fact that it wasn't even like, oh, they run man coverage at an average rate. No, they don't run man coverage at all. That, to me, is a really big advantage for Nebraska in this game. And you mentioned the defensive line on the other side of the ball. Indiana has not played a defensive line like that yet. And I think that could create a lot of issues. It created issues for Colorado in that game when Nebraska dominated them in that one. So I got Nebraska in a very, very close game. I can totally see it going the other way too. But I think that Raiola, against that zone defense and the defense on the other side of the ball, they're going to spoil the Hoosiers' undefeated season. And we've seen Nebraska play big games before, right? They played Colorado. They played Illinois. This is the first time Indiana's getting tested right now. So if you punch them in the mouth, how will they respond? They haven't got punched in the mouth yet. And I think Nebraska definitely will at least get one haymaker in there in this game. So I think Nebraska will win in a very, very close one. But it's going to be an awesome, awesome game at noon that we'll be watching in the press box in the Miami-Louisville game. We'll have that up on our laptops for sure because it is going to be a really must-see game, honestly.